Some people are impossible to offend. You've met someone like this. Someone who gets criticized and doesn't crumble, who gets ignored and doesn't spiral, who faces something genuinely unfair and somehow stays completely grounded. And the strange part? They're not emotionally stronger than you. They haven't been through less pain. They haven't had an easier life. They've simply learned something that most people spend their entire lives never discovering. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what it is. Almost 2,000 years ago, there was a Roman emperor. He governed the most powerful empire in the world. Wars, plague, political betrayal, the death of children he loved. He faced all of it. And somehow he stayed grounded, not because life was gentle with him, but because he had built something inside himself, something no external force could reach. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and the private journal he kept written only for himself, never meant to be read, is still one of the most studied books in the world. Around the same time, a man named Seneca spent his life as an advisor to one of history's most dangerous rulers. He lived for years with death hovering over him, and when the order finally came to end his life, he met it with complete calm. What these men built, what the Stoics refined over centuries, was a complete operating system for the human mind. A way of living inside uncertainty without being destroyed by it. That is what this video is about. 12 principles. Each one practical. Each one tested not in a philosophy classroom but in real life, under real pressure. Let's begin. But before we go into principle 1, I need to say something most people skip. These ideas will feel obvious when you hear them. That's the trap, because knowing something and having it actually change how you respond are two completely different things. The Stoics trained daily, repeatedly, and that's what made the difference. Principle 1, the dichotomy of control. Here's where Stoicism begins. Not with inspiration, not with quotes about resilience. It begins with one question, simple, almost brutal. What is actually in your control? Epictetus, a man born into slavery who became one of the most studied philosophers in history, built his entire philosophy on one distinction: your thoughts, your intentions, your choices, your responses. That is your territory. Everything else, what people say about you, whether your plan succeeds, whether someone likes you, that is not your territory. The problem is that most of us spend 90% of our mental energy on the 10% we cannot control. We obsess over the outcome of an interview, but not the quality of our preparation. We replay what someone said, instead of examining how we responded. Seneca saw this with brutal clarity. He wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And if you've ever stayed awake at 3 a.m. over something that never even happened, you already know exactly how true that is. Every morning before anything else takes 60 seconds, ask yourself 2 questions. First, what can I actually influence today? Second, what am I carrying right now that I need to put down? This is not passive, it's surgical. You're directing your attention precisely where it can do something real. The mind that obsesses over what it cannot control is like someone running on a treadmill and wondering why they're not going anywhere. Exhausting, pointless. Principle 2. Your thoughts are not facts. One of the most radical things the Stoics ever taught was this: it is not events that disturb us, it is our interpretation of events. Marcus Aurelius came back to this idea constantly in his private journal. He understood, perhaps more than anyone, that the quality of a person's inner life depended almost entirely on the quality of their thinking, not their circumstances, their thinking. Two people receive the same harsh criticism from their boss. One goes home devastated, replays the moment all evening, convinces themselves they're incompetent. The other thinks, okay, what can I actually use from that? And moves on. Same event, completely different experience. The only variable is how each person interpreted what happened. Your mind is constantly narrating your life, and that narration is not neutral. It is colored by your past, your fears, your insecurities. It is not automatically true. When someone doesn't reply to your message, and you think they must be upset with me, that is not a fact. That is a story you created. When you fail at something and you think I'm just not good enough, that is not a fact. That is an interpretation. The practice here is distance. You learn to observe your thoughts instead of just living inside them. Instead of I'm a failure, you notice, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. That moment of observation is where your freedom lives. Tonight, when a difficult thought arises, don't fight it. Don't follow it. Just name it. That's the fear of rejection talking. Simply naming what you're experiencing breaks the automatic pattern. That split second of choice is everything. But here's where most people make the mistake. They take these first two principles and think, okay, I just need to think more positively. That is the wrong lesson. The next principle is about something much more difficult and much more powerful. Principle 3. The obstacle is not the enemy. 168 ad. The Roman Empire is being attacked on two fronts simultaneously. A plague has already killed millions of people. Crops are failing. And the Emperor Marcus Aurelius sits down and writes in his private journal, not about strategy, not about survival, but about a principle. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He wasn't being poetic. He was describing something he lived by in real time. When something blocked his path, he didn't just endure it. He asked, what does this obstacle make possible? A river blocked by a fallen tree doesn't stop flowing. It finds another route, often a better one. Think about this honestly. The people you most admire, the ones who built something real, did they succeed because nothing went wrong, or because of how they handled everything that did? The Stoics trained themselves to look at obstacles with curious detachment. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this asking of me? Seneca understood this dimension of difficulty that most people miss. He said, the man who has been through nothing is actually the most fragile, because he has never been tested, and he has no idea how he will respond when the test finally comes. Difficulty is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Principle 4. Amor Fati, love what is. There is a Latin phrase the Stoics used, Amor Fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, not just tolerating it, loving it, choosing it, even when it's terrible. Now, before you push back, I want to be precise about what this means. This is not about pretending bad things are good. A serious illness is not secretly a blessing. Losing someone you love is not actually for the best. What Amor Fati is really about is this. The moment has already happened. It is done. Fighting against the reality of what is a battle you will lose every single time, and the cost is your peace. Marcus Aurelius lost children. He lost close friends to betrayal. He governed through a plague that killed millions. And yet in his private journal, You see him returning repeatedly to the same theme. Accept what is, then do your work. There's a story, perhaps the most extreme demonstration of this principle in modern history. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. He had every reason to collapse, every reason to lose himself entirely. But he noticed something in those camps. The men who survived, psychologically, were not always the strongest physically. They were the ones who found meaning inside suffering, who chose their relationship to their circumstances, even when they could not change the circumstances themselves. You cannot choose what happens to you, but you can always choose your relationship to it. The next time you feel that resistance that this shouldn't be happening, try asking something different. Not why me, but now what? Stay with me, because what comes next, most people never learn until it's too late. And once you understand it, everything about how you spend your time will start to look different. Principle 5. The impermanence of everything. Let me tell you about a habit Marcus Aurelius had. Every day this man who held more power than almost any human being in history would remind himself that everything he loved would eventually disappear, not as a morbid exercise, as a calibration tool. But let me bring this back to something real, something you can feel right now. Think about the last time you were with someone you love. Were you actually there, or were you somewhere else in your head replaying something, planning something, worrying about something? That moment, that actual moment, will never exist again. Seneca said it this way. He wrote that all the wealth, all the position, all the security people spend their lives chasing, none of it is truly theirs. The only thing that genuinely belongs to you is how you spend your attention. The Stoics practiced what they called memento mori. Remember that you will die, not as depression, as a calibration tool, a way of asking, is this thing I'm agonizing over actually important? Is this grudge worth carrying? Is this fear worth shrinking my life for? When you hold impermanence in one hand and your problems in the other, you start to see the problems differently. That person who hurt you also temporary. That version of yourself you're not proud of also temporary. And so is the good, your health, the people you love, this exact season of your life. Which means now is the only real currency you have. Spending it on resentment, on comparison, on worry about things outside your control. That is a genuine waste of something irreplaceable. Principle 6. Choose your response, not your reaction. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Walter Mischel ran a study. He put children in a room with a single marshmallow and told them, if you can wait 15 minutes without eating it, you'll get 2. Some children ate it immediately. Others waited. But here's what made the study remarkable when they followed these children into adulthood. The ones who could delay consistently showed better outcomes across almost every area of life, not because they were smarter, but because they had learned to create space between impulse and action. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years before. The research confirmed it. Somewhere between what happens to you and what you do about it, there is a space. It might be a fraction of a second. It might feel invisible, but everything depends on what you do with it. Marcus Aurelius committed to this practice every single day. He felt anger. He felt frustration. He felt the pull of impulsiveness. But he returned, again and again, to the practice of pausing long enough to choose. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Not fighting anger, not suppressing it, just delay. Buy yourself a moment. Take a breath. Walk away if you need to. The pause itself is the practice. Think about how many things you've said in moments of anger that you spent weeks wishing you could take back. The pause removes that regret before it exists. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. Because the next principle is the one most people resist the hardest, not because it's complicated, but because it asks you to give up something that most of us have been chasing our entire lives. Principle 7. Let go of reputation. Let me ask you something honestly. How many decisions did you make today that were shaped by what someone else might think? Not just big decisions. Small ones. What you wore, what you said or didn't say, how you responded to a message, whether you shared an opinion or kept it to yourself. Most of us are performing constantly, and we don't even realize it. Marcus Aurelius, who had more reason than almost anyone in history to care about his public image, wrote something in his journal that still stops people cold. He said he had noticed something strange about human beings, that we love ourselves more than anyone else, but we care more about what others think of us than about what we think of ourselves. We hand other people the power to determine our value, and then we wonder why we feel so unstable. Seneca was direct about this. He said that the person who needs constant approval is never actually free, because their inner state is entirely dependent on the verdict of people whose opinions change daily, whose understanding of you is partial at best, and whose own lives are just as uncertain as yours. When you stop building your identity on external approval, something shifts. You stop being afraid of honesty. You stop shrinking yourself to fit other people's comfort. You start making decisions based on what you actually value. Principle 8. Negative visualization. Most people avoid this practice because it feels genuinely uncomfortable, which is exactly why it works. The Stoics regularly imagined losing the things they valued most: their health, their relationships, their freedom. Not to be pessimistic, to feel the value of what they had before they lost it. Seneca wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." And what's fascinating is that modern psychology confirms this. Research on what's called mental contrasting shows that people who occasionally visualize negative outcomes, not obsessively, but deliberately, experience more gratitude, make better decisions under pressure, and handle loss more gracefully when it actually comes. The Stoics had a name for this practice: premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of difficult things. Try this tonight. 5 minutes. Sit quietly and imagine that one thing you depend on most, your health, a relationship that matters to you, your ability to do the work you do, was suddenly no longer available. Don't rush past it. Feel it. Then open your eyes. That feeling. That's not sadness. That's appreciation, finding its way through the numbness of habit. That's how you stop sleepwalking through your own life. Principle 9. The inner citadel. Imagine losing your job tomorrow, not as an abstract exercise. Actually imagine it. The phone call, the conversation, the moment you realize it's over. Most people collapse in that moment, not because of the practical problem, the finances, the uncertainty, the logistics, but because their entire identity was attached to the title. They weren't a person who had a job, they were the job. And when the job went, they went with it. The Stoics spent their lives building a protection against exactly this. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, an interior fortress, something built so carefully, so deliberately, that no external event could reach its core. He wrote that the future, however uncertain, would meet a mind already equipped to handle it, because the same reasoning that got you through yesterday's difficulty is available to you tomorrow. Think of the people you've seen who genuinely have this. When everything around them becomes unstable, they don't dissolve, not because they feel nothing, but because something in them is anchored to something external events cannot touch. That anchor isn't talent, it isn't luck, it's built through the kind of consistent, daily, internal work that most people never commit to. Seneca described it simply. He said, "No person can have everything they want, but any person can choose not to be enslaved by what they don't have." The difference between those two positions is the entire distance between suffering and freedom. And now, this is the point where I need to warn you about something. Because the next principle is one that Stoicism gets badly misunderstood on. People hear Stoic and they think cold, detached, doesn't care about anyone. That is exactly wrong. And the next 2 minutes will show you why. Principle 10. Stoic compassion, the misunderstood side. Marcus Aurelius had a practice he described in his journal. Every morning before the day began, he would remind himself of something. That the people he would encounter today, some of them would be difficult, ungrateful, arrogant, careless. And then he would remind himself of something else. That every single one of them was struggling, shaped by experiences he couldn't see, carrying things he didn't know about, and that their nature, however frustrating, was not fundamentally different from his own. This is perhaps the most radical form of compassion that exists, not the kind that depends on people being lovable, not the kind that requires them to deserve your understanding. A compassion rooted simply in shared humanity. Seneca expressed it in one line that I keep coming back to. He said, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness, not because people always deserve it, but because kindness is an expression of who you are, not a response to who they are." Stoicism is often represented as a philosophy of hardening. It is actually a philosophy of clarity, and when you see clearly, you see that nearly everyone is doing the best they can with the mind and the history they've been given. And this is where modern life becomes dangerous, because most people aren't ultimately controlled by other people. They're controlled by their own desires, by what they've been taught to want, by the constant, relentless message that what they currently have is not enough. The Stoics saw this trap, and they had a name for it. Principle 11. The discipline of desire. Look around you right now. Almost everything you think you want was planted there, by someone else, for someone else's benefit, not yours. Every advertisement you've ever seen was engineered to make you feel that what you currently have is insufficient. Every feed you scroll through is curated to show you the peak moments of other people's lives, creating a constant ambient sense that yours is missing something. This is not an accident. This is a system. and most people are living inside it without ever questioning it. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has little who is poor, but the one who always craves more." Think about that carefully. By every external measure, many people alive today have more comfort, more security, more entertainment than kings had 2 centuries ago. And yet the feeling of enough remains constantly out of reach, because the game is designed so that you never win it. The moment you get what you wanted, the target moves. The Stoic antidote is not deprivation, it's examination. Before each pursuit, ask yourself, do I actually want this? Or have I been taught to want it? Will having this genuinely improve my life? Or will I simply want the next thing the moment this one arrives? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not occasionally, but regularly, that the things he needed to live well were always closer than he thought. Not in the next achievement, not in the next version of himself. Right here, in how he chose to think. We've come a long way. And I want to close with something that the Stoics considered the foundation of everything else. Not the most complicated idea, but perhaps the hardest to actually practice. Principle 12. Live as if this is the last time. Seneca, near the end of his life, wrote something in Latin that has stayed with me. Dum differtur vita transcurrit. While we delay, life passes. Not passes in the sense of going by, passes in the sense of slipping through your hands while you are looking somewhere else. How much of your life has happened while you were somewhere else in your head? Rehearsing conversations that never happened, worrying about futures that never arrived, replaying moments that cannot be changed. The Stoics didn't treat presence as a luxury or a wellness practice. They treated it as a discipline, a choice made repeatedly every time the mind tried to escape into the past or the future. When you are with someone you love, be there. Fully, not performing presence while actually somewhere else. When you are doing work that matters, bring your whole attention to it. This is the practice that makes all the others possible. Because you cannot apply any of what we've discussed today in a moment you're not actually present for. Seneca's words again, while we delay, life passes. Not later, not when things are better, not when you finally feel ready. Now, 12 principles. Each one simple to understand, each one requiring consistent practice to actually live. And that, honestly, is the most important thing I can leave you with today. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote his journal not because he had mastered these ideas, but because he kept forgetting them. He slipped. He reacted impulsively. He let things bother him that shouldn't have. And the next morning he returned to the work. That's the practice, not perfection. Return. Start with one principle today. Just one. The next time something happens that would normally knock you off balance, pause. Notice, ask yourself which of these ideas applies. That pause, that small moment of choice, is where the entire philosophy lives. Seneca wrote near the end of his life, "It is not that I'm brave, it is that I know what deserves to be feared." And most of what we fear does not deserve it. Take care of your mind. It is the only home you will inhabit for your entire life. Thank you for watching.